恭敬大德圣听，为这法会及一切众生，请转妙法轮，教导我们如可了生脱死离苦得乐，诸得无生。Build the Sangha with great virtue, out of compassion, for the sake of assembly and all living beings. Please turn wonderful Dharma will to teach us how to leave suffering and attain bliss and end birth and death, and quickly realize non-birth.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one. Namo saranto suchetoye alahati sanmiao sanputoche. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered, even in a billion eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Shufu, and all good knowing advisors, welcome back to this week's class number 65 as we explore the Medicine Master Buddha Sutra. You can't see it, but I'm smiling right now because today's class will still continue on the wheel turning king. And this particular, it's like a, this is like a whole, it's like I'm just sharing stories. These are sutras and teachings by the Buddha, but to me, it's just like a very interesting story. And today's story is very, very interesting because it has to do with how the 10 wholesome deeds directly affect the lifespan of humans. Some of you may know that human lifespan goes in a circle from 84,000 years. So there'll be a time when human beings can live for 84,000 years, and then it will drop. Shufu says every 100 years it drops by a year, if I have that right, or increase by a year depending on what age we are in. Unfortunately, right now we are in the age of decline, and then it will drop to I think 10 years old. Humans will live for only 10 years old, and then it will rise again. So that's what I have for you today. It was something that I discovered just 2 weeks ago, so I'm very happy to be able to share that. But before we go there, let's recite Medicine Master Buddha's name 7 times. Namo, quelling disasters, lengthening life, Medicine Master Buddha. 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 Namo, quelling disasters, lending life, medicine master, Buddha Namo. Quelling disasters, lending life, medicine master, Buddha, medicine master does come one. 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 Okay, let me change the slides and this slideshow. Okay, as usual, does anyone have any questions or stories or any experiences that they would like to share? If you do, you can type it into the chat box or just unmute your mic. Okay. So what I have today, I already given you a sneak preview. It's something called the Chakavati Suta, or literally it means the wheel turning monarch. Monarch. Sutra. So Shakyamuni Buddha told this sutra, and I'll just read it. It says there was a king named Dalha Nemi, and as we explored last week, wheel turning kings are usually very just and principled. And he says his dominion extended to all four sides. He achieved stability in the country. Actually, that would, when we say country here, I think it means the entire world, the world system. And he possessed the seven treasures: the wheel, the elephant, the horse, the jewel, the woman or his queen, the treasurer and the counselor as a seventh treasure. He had over 1,000 sons who were all valiant and heroic, able to crush the armies of his enemies. And after conquering this land, as his land girt by sea, he reigned by principle without rod or sword. So you rule because of your virtue. People, the other kings, voluntarily submit to you. You don't have to conquer them by any force. Okay. It says, then after many years, many hundred years, many thousand years, says King Dahanemi addressed one of his men. He said, my good man, when you see that the heavenly blue treasure has receded back from its place, please tell me. So after many thousands of years had passed, so I guess this is a time when the average lifespan of humans were 84,000 years, and the wheel turning king would have a even longer lifespan than average people. So the king was told that the wheel treasure had receded. That means it had either disappeared. In some sutras they say disappear. In some sutras they say just sink to the ground. So when this happened, the king took it as a sign. So the king summoned the crown prince, probably his eldest son or the most worthy son, and said, "Dear prince, my heavenly blue treasure has receded back from its place. I heard that when this happens to a wheel-turning monarch, he does not have long to live. I have enjoyed human pleasures. Now it is time for me to seek heavenly pleasures." He's very confident of his rebirth. He says, "Come, dear prince, rule this land surrounded by ocean. I shall shave off my hair and beard, dress in ochre robes, and go forth from the lay life to homelessness." So this is how the king deals with knowing that his lifespan might be ending. He leaves home. He becomes a monk. That means he devotes the rest of his time to practice. And that's why he says that, he's leaving behind human pleasures and he's going to seek heavenly pleasures. So when there was a new king, he inherited the throne, but not the wheel, because the wheel treasure, appears because through the virtue of a king, not because you inherit the throne, but because of what you do. So this new king naturally did not, how you say, he was appointed the king, but the will was not the old kings to give to him. Let's put it this way. So this made the new king a bit unhappy, but he was given the advice. He was the royal sage, told him what to do. He says on the 15th day, you having cleaned yourself and observe the suburb, meaning we can interpret that to mean the 8 precepts. It says the heavenly wheel treasure will appear to you with 1,000 spokes, with its rim and hub complete in every detail, meaning the genuine wheel will appear to you. It's not some wheel made in Hong Kong or China or wherever else things are commonly made from. It's the genuine thing. It's the original wheel, not a replica made by anyone. So then the king asks, he says, Sire, what are the noble duties of a wheel-turning monarch? So the reply was, you rely on principle, which means you honor, you respect, and you venerate principle. You have principle as a flag, banner, and authority. And what principles? You provide protection and security for the people under you, your court, your troops, the noblemen, the vassals, the Brahmin and householders, people of town and country, mendicants, the ascetics and the Brahmins, and even the animals, including beasts and birds. It says, do not let injustice prevail in the realm. Pay money to the penniless in the realm. So this is some of the duties of a new king. And then he says, and there are ascetics and Brahmins in the realm who avoid intoxication and negligence, are settled in patience and gentleness, and who tame, calm, and extinguish themselves. This is a very elegant way of saying people who concentrate on their own minds and who practice, in other words. So he says, from time to time, you should go up to them and ask, sirs, what is skillful? What is unskillful? What is blameworthy? What is blameless? What should be cultivated and what should not be cultivated? Doing what leads to my lasting harm and suffering, and doing what leads to my lasting welfare and happiness. Having heard them, you should reject what is unskillful and undertake and follow what is skillful. So this advice is to tell the king not to be too full of himself, not to think that just because he's the king that, he's so great until one does not need advice from other people. So he's telling the king that he should ask for advice from those with wisdom. Okay. And let me advance to the next slide. So the new king did the duties of what a wheel-turning king should do. And on the 15th day, he had bathed himself. He had gone to observe the 8 precepts. Okay, observing the 8 precepts, as we have discovered in one of our very early classes, it means not just like not listening to entertainment or not watching TV, not listening to music, not just that, but you create the conditions so that you can practice, so that you can either recite the Buddha's name, or you can meditate, or you can do walking meditation. So that's what it means when we talk about the 8 precepts. It's not just strictly following the 8 precepts through the body, mouth, and mind, but then what do you do when you create those conditions? And those conditions are created so that one can practice. Okay, so that's the 8 precepts. So when he did that, most likely he was sitting cross-legged in meditation. Maybe he was reciting the Buddha's name. The wheel appeared before him, just as the wheel appeared before his father. So seeing this, the king thought, I have heard that when the heavenly wheel treasure appears to a king in this way, he becomes a wheel-turning monarch. Just like his father, he said, am I then a wheel-turning monarch? So then the same story happens as last week. He calls forth the wheel to roll throughout the world system. and he flies after the wheel with his entourage of armies, his troops, and his queen probably, and everyone else. And he conquers the world system, and he rules. And so the story goes on 7 times. So the wheel disappears for this present king. He realizes what's going to happen. He passes the throne to his crown prince, and he leaves home. And then the next wheel turning king does everything the same. They repeat the same thing. The wheel appears to them. They conquer the world. And after many, many thousands of years, a very, very long lifespan, they leave home and they pass the throne on to the next crown prince. Until the 7th king. Okay. And after when we come to the 8th king, that's when things start to get interesting. And we call it the king of the period of decline. It is part of the sutra, because king number 8 didn't ask about what the rightful duties of a wheel turning king was supposed to be. So king number 8 instead, he governed according to his own wishes, what he thought was right, instead of asking for advice. And when he was made the king, the wheel had vanished, so he was made the king, and he was unhappy that it did not, the wheel did not appear to him. But he didn't do anything at all to try to get the wheel back. He didn't ask why the wheel had disappeared. He didn't ask what he should do to get the wheel back, and he just did what he thought was right. So it is said that after a while, the prosperity of the people in the nations started to decrease, and things were in a period of decline. And so when this happened, okay, so it was said that the ministers and counselors, the treasury officials, the military officers, the guardsmen and advisors, they all gathered and said to the king, said, "Sire, when governed according to your own ideas, the nations do not prosper like before, as they did when former kings implemented the noble duties of a wheel-turning monarch. In your realm are found ministers and counselors, treasury officials, military officers, guardsmen and advisors, both ourselves and others, who remember the noble duties of a wheel-turning monarch. Please, your majesty, ask us about the noble duties of a wheel-turning monarch. We will answer you." So the king was given a chance to govern, and he governed until things started getting bad, and which left his, for lack of a better word, his cabinet, his advisors, to approach him, to implore him to seek advice. Indirectly telling him, "Hey, you're doing things wrong." So it's amazing how humankind is such that I don't have to say much, but we all know in recent history what happens when we have people who are in positions of power, and they, how you say, it becomes more like a dictatorship, which is essentially what this king is doing. He is governing according to what he thinks rather than what should be done. Okay. So despite his cabinet advising him this way, the king still refused to seek any advice. Okay. So as poverty grew and grew and people started getting more and more desperate, people began to steal. Before that, no one had any reason to steal. Stealing did not exist. Or maybe was not widespread. But people started getting, started finding themselves having to steal to survive. Okay. So naturally, these people were caught. And when they were caught, they were brought before this king. So this is what happened. Say the king would ask the arrested person, say, "Is it really true, mister, that you stole from others with the intention to commit theft?" That means you knew what you were doing and you did it anyway. He says it's true. And when the king asked what was the reason that you had to steal, the answer came back that I can't survive. So it was like forced to steal. So the king did what he thought was right. He paid money to that person, saying, with this money, keep yourself alive, provide for your mother and father, your partners and children. Work for a living and establish an uplifting religious donation for ascetics and Brahmins that conducive to heaven, ripens in happiness and leads to heaven. So you can see from this, the king is not like, how you say, the king has some principles, some sound principles, and he has a good heart. And when he finds out that his subject is stealing, he wants them to not have to steal anymore. So he provides them with what they need, and with good advice too. So what happened was the word started to spread as those people who were arrested for stealing, they were rewarded by the king. More and more people found out. So they realized that if you needed money, if you get arrested for stealing, you will be rewarded by the king instead of being punished. So others began to steal so that they could get money from the king. So the king's strategy didn't really work out. So as more and more people begin to be caught for stealing, the king realized, this is not a very good idea. So the king thought, he said, if I pay money to anyone who steals from others, it will only increase the stealing. I better make an end of this person, finish him off, and chop off his head. So things started to change. So then he ordered his men, he said, tie this man's arms tightly behind his back with a strong rope, shave his head, take him to the square, chop off his head, and display. Meaning he wanted to make an example to people that this thing stops right now. If you steal anymore, this is what's going to happen to you. So with a rod, through punishment, very severe punishment, the king thinks that he can put an end to this. So the previous kings didn't have to deal with this. Why? Because they made sure no one would starve. They made sure that people who were penniless were helped out by the government. So people didn't have to resort to stealing. But because this 8th king neglected to do that, now he's dealing with the symptoms that are growing instead of dealing with the root of the cause. So what happened? When people realized that you would be killed for stealing, they began to make swords. They began to make weapons. Why? So that when they stole, they would kill the people they stole from, so there will be no witnesses. And without witnesses, then they would not be caught. So the king's decision to punish people who stole instead of taking care of the root of the cause led to people being killed, and eventually this led to entire villages and towns and even highways being infested with murderous groups of people. So the Buddha said that by not providing to the needy, poverty became widespread. When poverty became widespread, it led to theft. And when theft became widespread, combined with punishment from the king, it led to killing. So the sutra then says that for the sentient beings among whom killing was widespread, their lifespan and beauty declined. Those people live for 80,000 years, but their children live for 40,000 years. So because of killing, the lifespan of people got reduced in half. And it says among the people who live for 40,000 years, this new generation with half the lifespan of the previous generation, when I say generation, not like literally the next generation, but over a period of time, a certain person stole something from others. They arrested him and presented him to the king, saying, Your Majesty, this person stole from others. Okay, so this just change in the story right now. So what happens next is the king asked the person, is it really true that you stole from others? And this person lied. He said, no, sire, it's deliberately lying. So lying became widespread. And when that happened, the lifespan further declined. So for this, at that age, people who live for 40,000 years, after people learn how to lie, to try to get away from, to cover the things that they have done, their future generations, their lifespan decreased to only 20,000 years. Okay. But this takes a long time. And then for people who live for 20,000 years, when for their children, their lifespan decreased to 10,000 years. Why? Because of backbiting. So people would report each other. They say, oh, my neighbor stole. And because people started reporting one another to the authorities, the lifespan further decreased. And then from 10,000 years to 5,000 years. Why? Because of adultery. In the Sutra, it said that adultery happened because some people realized that, oh, this person is better looking than my partner. And that caused desire in them. And then from 5,000 years to 2,500 years, why? Because people developed harsh speech and frivolous speech. They started talking nonsense, talking about things that doesn't really benefit anyone at all. You just waste people's time, you waste your time. And so harsh speech and frivolous speech half people's lifespan further again. And then that reduced from 2,500 years to 1,000 years when people's desire started increasing and ill will. Compared to us right now, Saha says that this explains why our life is so short. If you look, okay, the next slide has more of this unwholesome deeds. During this time, this form of unwholesome deeds were not widespread at all. It was very, very uncommon. But if you look at our time right now, we take it for granted. In some places, even in for like government officials and people who are supposed to be in power, it becomes a virtue instead, something to be proud of instead of something to be ashamed about. Okay, so what are the remainder of the sutta? From 1,000 years to 500 years, why? Because of wrong views. And we've gone through wrong views before. People who don't believe in cause and effect. They think you can do anything and there's no repercussions for that. That's one example of wrong views. And then from 500 years further to 250 or 200 years to illicit desire, immoral greed, and wrong thoughts. This is a further decline of desire, greed, and wrong thinking. And then from 250 years onwards, the sutta says that three things became widespread: lack of respect for one's parents, for ascetics and Brahmins, and failure to honor elders in the family. So slowly, even within the family, the family structure started to break down. And if you look at what's going on right now, it's becoming increasingly normal that the traditional family structure of grandparents, mother, father, and children in one household is becoming more and more rare. It's not you can't assume that to be the norm anymore. For example, say maybe 50 years ago, that was normal. It's not anymore. So the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha explains further. He says, there will come a time, mendicants, he was talking to the monks, says when these people will have children who live for 10 years. So 10 years becomes a lifespan. He says, among the people who live for 10 years, girls will be marriageable at 5. The following flavors will disappear: ghee, butter, oil, honey, molasses, and salt. Meaning, food will become like tasteless, more or less tasteless, or you could say that the nutrition in the food gets lost. And the Buddha says, the best kind of food will be finger millet, just as fine rice with meat is the best kind of food today. So coarse food becomes the best food that they have when the lifespan of humans, the average lifespan of humans is 10 years old. So there's this story, this anecdote. One of the past monks at CDTB, I don't know the full details, but this was told to me by, let me see, I think Dharma Master Show. Sorry, not Show. Dharma Master Shun, I believe, told me this story. He said one of his monk Bhikshu brothers in a meditation session had a memory flashback. And the flashback was that he used to be a nun during Shakyamuni Buddha's time. And the memory was of bathing in the river Ganges. And during that time, he said the water in the river, he said it was more milky than like just normal water. And it had a form of nutritious, it had nutritious properties, meaning drinking the water revitalizes a person. So that was something that just came to my mind. Okay, so the Buddha further says, he describes what happens when humans' average lifespan is 10 years old. He says, the 10 ways of doing skillful deeds will totally disappear. And the 10 ways of doing unskillful deeds will explode in popularity. You know, the Buddha is talking about when people's lifespan is 10 years, but it kind of seems like we are very close to that. The Buddha says, those people who will not even have the word skillful. Those people will not even have the word skillful, still less anyone who does what is skillful. And anyone who disrespects mother and father, ascetics and Brahmins, and fails to honor the elders in the family will be venerated and praised, just as the opposite is venerated and praised today. So if you do all these upside down things, people praise you and it becomes a virtue. So virtue turns upside down. There's no longer, it's just upside down. Yeah, what should be respected is not, and what should not be respected is. So the Buddha further says, there will be no recognition of the status of mother, aunts or wives and partners of teachers and respected people. The world will become promiscuous like goats and sheep, chickens and pigs and dogs and jackals. They'll be full of hostility towards each other with acute ill will, malevolence, and thoughts of murder. Even a mother will feel like this for her child, and a child for its mother, father for child for father, brother for sister, and sister for brother. They'll be just like a deer hunter when he sees a deer, full of hostility, ill will, malevolence, and thoughts of killing. You know what that sounds like? Animals. Like there are some animals who don't recognize their young and will happily just gobble up their young, their freshly hatched younglings. We all know animals, to them, family relations have no real meaning. So this is what's going to happen to human beings. Buddha further says this, among the people who live for 10 years, there will be an interregnum of sorts lasting 7 days. What does that word mean? It means a vacuum of power, a lack of government, and not just a lack of structure that people can rely on, but also widespread unrest. People will be fighting with each other. There will be no laws, or even if there's laws, there will be no one to enforce them, and everyone ignores whatever structure or laws they are. A failed state. There are some places in the world right now that's like that, and for regular people who do not hold guns, their lives become really, really miserable. Even I'm not suggesting that those who hold guns have a good life. No, it's just miserable for everyone. It's everyone for themselves. So Shakyamuni Buddha says is during that time they will see each other as beasts, meaning there's no mutual respect. You don't respect people's right to live or people's wish to live. So sharp swords will appear in their hands with which they will take each other's life, crying, "It's a beast, it's a beast." But then some of those beings will think, "Let us neither be perpetrators nor victims. Why don't we hide in thick grass, thick jungle, thick trees, inaccessible riverlands or rugged mountains and survive on forest roots and fruits?" So that's what they do. So I remember Shifu sharing this as well. And the examples that Shifu described it in very, very similar terms. Shifu says that for people like them, people like this, even a blade of grass can become a weapon. I think that means that they use anything to kill. You don't rely on, you can just pick up a stick and you can use that stick to try to kill another person. But not everyone is like that, thank God. And so some of these people, they see the violence and they have a better sense, maybe self-preservation. So they go and hide instead. They run away and they hide in secluded areas. And apparently, this vacuum of power happens for 7 days. And the Buddha says when these 7 days have passed, then people start emerging from their hiding places and they're very thankful. They embrace each other. They come together in one voice and cry, "How fantastic!" Says, "You are still alive. Despite what has happened, you are alive." Okay. And then these people who are still who have survived says they think that it's because we undertook unskillful things that we suffered such an extensive loss of our relatives. So they're slightly better than animals. They can, despite acting like animals, they still can reflect. And they say, we better do what is skillful. And what skillful thing should we do? Why don't we refrain from killing living creatures? Having undertaken this skillful thing, will live by it. So that's what they do. Because of undertaking this, and then the Buddha says, because of undertaking this skillful thing, their lifespan and beauty will grow. And those people who live for 10 years will have children who live for 20 years. So that's the end of the decline. And this is when the period of growth increases. So before we go on to the next part, Saha, yes, you have a question you wanted to ask?
Amitabha. Dharma Master, how can we protect ourselves life after life in case if we're born into this Saha world again? I know that chanting Amitabha Buddha and making a vow to be born there, but at the same time, being a layperson, it's not 100% guaranteed. And I just want to know, taking the vows life after life, are we, in case if we're born in this time period, are we going to be protected by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Amitabha.
Yes. The answer to your question is, okay. First, the easiest way to answer your question would be the 10 wholesome deeds. Practicing the 10 wholesome deeds would be this sutta, the Chakavati Suta, is this section of the sutra is all about the importance of the 10 wholesome deeds. So just the 10 wholesome deeds alone, we can see the effect that it has on humanity, the effect of virtue on humanity. So that's one way. The second way is, as long as you practice in our daily life, there is a sutta called the Maha Sutta. And the Maha Sutta is very appropriate because it's about one of the Buddha's lay disciples who expresses his fear to the Buddha. He said sometimes he's not mindful, and he says, what happens if he goes to the city and maybe he's read the Shurangama Sutra, which says that at the time of death, that when a person dies and their mind is overcome with emotion instead of logic, as how we discovered, I think 2 classes ago, a person like that falls. So maybe he read the Shurangama Sutra or he heard it explained by the Buddha, and he asked the Buddha, he said, what happens if I'm in the city and I get overrun by an ox cart? I see the ox cart running towards me. I get full of fear and I die. So what's going to happen to me? So the Buddha reassures him. The Buddha says, don't worry. He says, because you are practicing right now. The Buddha explains using the metaphor of a tree. He says, as a tree grows, if you prop up the tree, you prune the tree properly, and you make sure it grows upright and straight. He says, after a certain while, the tree won't fall. Meaning that even if you get overcome by fear or emotion sometimes, but if you live your life trying your best to practice, then you have nothing to worry about, because that's what keeps you upright. So continuously upholding the 10 wholesome deeds, practicing generosity. In your case, Saha, you recite the mantras. I know you have a very strong practice. Then even within the Saha world, there are good, fortunate rebirths, like in the heavens, although that has an end, but it doesn't mean that you stop practicing. So by concentrating on the present moment, using the 10 wholesome deeds, we don't have to worry about the future. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay, and for your question, where to find this sutta, just Google Chakavati Suta in Google, and you will get the full sutra as told by Shakyamuni Buddha. All right. Okay, anyone has any questions? You can unmute your mic or just type into the chat box. Okay, so let's continue with the sutra right now. Then the Buddha says, because of undertaking this skillful thing, their lifespan and beauty will grow. Those people who live for 20 years will have children who live for 40 years. Those people who live for 40 years will have children who live for 80 years, then 160 years, 320 years, 640 years, 2,000 years, 4,000 years, 8,000 years, 20, 40, and finally 80,000 years. Usually it's 84,000 years described. Says, among the people who live for 80,000 years, girls will be marriageable at 500 as compared to today, or at 5 years old when their lifespan is 10 years old. So what are the things that people stop doing? What are the things that people stop doing? They stop stealing. They stop sexual misconduct. They stop lying. They stop backbiting, meaning that you start to mind your own business instead. You don't report on other people. They stop harsh speech. They stop talking nonsense. They stop being jealous or covetous, wanting things that they don't have, that other people have. They stop having feelings of ill will. They produce right view. They believe in cause and effect. And they illicit desire, immoral greed, and wrong thoughts reduce. And then they start learning how to pay respect to their parents, to ascetics and Brahmins and teachers, people with wisdom. And they begin to honor the elders, the ancestors in their families. And they start making this more and more normal, more and more a part of life. So the Buddha says then, at 80,000 years, he says, among the people who live for 80,000 years, there will be just 3 afflictions. Only 3 afflictions compared to right now. How many afflictions do we have? So what are the 3 afflictions? Greed, starvation, and old age. India will be successful and prosperous. The villages, towns, and capital cities will be no more than a chicken's flight apart. And the land will be as crowded as hell. I'm not sure why it's translated like this. This is a very unusual translation. Okay, now I understand. When they say crowded as hell, when people describe the hells, they say the hell is crowded. Crowded because a lot of the you just look at people nowadays, the things that we do. So the hells are crowded. So this term crowded as hell is not how we use this term, but literally it means crowded as just like the hells. Yeah, to be crowded just like the hells. In other words, full of people. Oh yeah, it says just full of people, like a ticket or rushes or reeds. The royal capital will be Benares, but renamed Ketumati, and it will be successful, prosperous, populous, full of people, with plenty of food. There will be 84,000 cities in India with a royal capital of Ketumati foremost. Okay. Sue has a question. She says, even though we practice 10 wholesome deeds now, but there are so many people who don't, how would the world be changed for the better? You start with yourself first. So we worry about the world, but the only thing we can really do is change ourselves first. So you change yourselves first. And at the same time, what other people do, well, when they eat, you don't get full. When they wear nice clothes, it's not you who benefit, right? When people make money, it's not you who become rich. So you start with yourself. And how is that helpful to the world? Well, when we practice well, then we understand more about the Dharma, and we are able to advise more and more people in the Dharma, either using the Dharma to remove their fears or to make them become better versions of themselves. Maybe we inspire them, and it is through that the world becomes a better place. So that's what Bodhisattvas do. Through their conduct, they had compassion, great compassion. They inspire others to change. That's the only real way you can change the world. It's not through magic. It's through hard work with every person that you meet. So want to be bodhisattvas in wanting to help others? First, you help yourself, or at the same time, as you help yourself, you help others. But it's hard work, because it is through the individuals that you meet that you change the world. And it's only by that you become a Buddha. So it's hard work, very hard work. But if you don't do it, who else will? Okay, so the Buddha, coming back to the sutra, the Buddha says, and in the royal capital of Ketumati, a king named Sankha will arise, a wheel-turning monarch. So we get a new wheel-turning king. Say a just and principled king. His dominion will extend to 4 sides. He achieves the ability, the 7 treasures, etc., etc., 1,000 sons, etc., etc., conquering without rod and sword. So the formula repeats itself. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the Buddha says this is a time when Maitreya Bodhisattva will arise in the world. So, but not, he says Buddha Maitreya. He says that the Blessed One named Maitreya will arise in the world, perfected, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world, supreme guide for those who wish to train, teachers of gods and humans, awakened, blessed, just as I have arisen today. He will realize with his own insight this world, with his gods, Maras and Brahmas, this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, gods and humans, and make it known to others just as I do today. He will teach the Dharma that's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, meaningful and well phrased. And he will reveal a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure, just as I do today. Maybe the Pure Land, what would be suitable for living beings during that time. It says he will look after a sangha of many thousand mendicants, just as I look after a sangha of many hundreds today. Then King Sankha will have the sacrificial post that had been built by King Maha raised up. After staying there, he will give it away to ascetics and Brahmins, paupers and vagrants, travelers and beggars. Then, having shaved off his hair and beard and dressed in ochre robes, he will go forth from the lay life to homelessness in the Buddha Maitreya's presence. King Mahapananda is mentioned, but no other information is given. Depending on how much time we have, it might be relevant to bring him up later, because it's a very wild story, but it has no bearing on today. And the Buddha says, soon after going forth, living withdrawn, diligent, keen, and resolute, he will realize the supreme end of the spiritual path in this very life. He will leave, having achieved with his own insight the goal for which gentlemen rightly go forth from the lay life to homelessness. So the king, this wheel-turning king, will leave home and will become a sage. I'm not sure if it means a stream enterer or arhat, but he will realize the goal. Okay. And then the Buddha, because he's speaking to the monks, he turns it around and he says, mendicants, you should roam inside your own territory, the domain of your fathers. Doing so, you will grow in lifespan, beauty, happiness, wealth, and power. So the lifespan, the beauty, the happiness, the wealth, and the power that the wheel-turning king has, the Buddha now recontextualizes it for monks. Okay, or rather for us, the Buddha is redefining it to what is actually important. So the Buddha says what is long life for a mendicant? All of us, we can assume the Buddha is speaking to us. He says when a mendicant develops the basis of psychic power that has immersion due to enthusiasm and active effort. The Buddha is talking about meditation and the dhyanas. Says they develop the basis of psychic power that has immersion due to energy and active effort. They develop the basis of psychic power that has immersion due to mental development and active effort. They develop the basis of psychic power that has immersion due to inquiry and active effort. Having developed and cultivated these four bases of psychic power, they may, if they wish, live on for the eon or what's left of the eon. This is long life for a mendicant. So the Buddha is pointing to what is actually long life and where does it come from? It comes from the four dhyanas. This is the Buddha describing what you need to get to the four dhyanas. So there's a question, is the world still going to be the planet Earth? Okay, even for the world, like a world system, there's a kalpa where a world from nothing comes into being, and there's a kalpa where the world is the world, where we have people and all these living beings living on it. And then there's a period where the world perishes. So when the Buddha here on your screen, it says, live on for the eon or what's left of the eon. I think the Buddha is describing what is left before the world gets consumed by, I think the world gets consumed by first, I think wind and then water. There's great winds, great floods, and then finally gets consumed by fire, and then there's nothing left. And then another eon comes when there are four eons where a world comes into being and goes into decay. And then these four eons make a great kalpa or great eon. So that's the answer to your question, Saha. Then when people come back, as far as they're concerned, when the new world is there, to them it's Earth. Wherever they are, for human beings, this is Earth. Yeah. Okay. And then so the Buddha now talks about what is long life as far as practicality, what is really long life from the Buddha's point of view is the four dhyanas. Then now the Buddha talks about what is real beauty. He says is when a mendicant is ethical, restrained in the monastic code, conducting themselves well and seeking alms in suitable places. Means the precepts. When we follow the 5 precepts, when we follow the 8 precepts, the 10 precepts, the left home precepts, or the Bodhisattva precepts, the Buddha says that's when you can be considered as good looking. They're seeing danger in the slightest fault, they keep the rules they've undertaken. This is beauty for a mendicant. That's very elegant. Okay. And then now the Buddha talks about what is happiness. This is when a mendicant, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first absorption, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. As the placing of the mind and keeping it connected are still, they enter and remain in the second absorption, third absorption, fourth absorption. This is happiness for a mendicant. This is the 4 dhyanas. So maybe what I said just now is not the 4 dhyanas. Just let me quickly go back to the slide, the basis of psychic power. I might have been mistaken. Maybe this is probably not the 4 dhyanas then. If anyone knows, I might have to do more research on the 4 bases of psychic power. Yeah, maybe next week I might elaborate more on this. So what I said earlier about this being the 4 dhyanas is not right. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, let's move on to this one, the absorptions. These are the 4 dhyanas. And even in the first dhyana alone, the feeling of joy and happiness that you get is, they say, is out of this world. It means nothing in this world can give you that pleasant feeling. It's not an emotional joy or happiness. It's the, when they describe Guanyin Pusat as being zhizai, like carefree, easy, it's that kind of joy and happiness. It's the lightness, that there's totally affliction and suffering free, that freedom of the mind. Okay. So the Buddha has talked about long life. He's talked about beauty. He's talked about happiness. Now he talks about wealth. Says what's wealth for a mendicant? It's when a monk meditates, spreading a heart full of love to one direction. This is the practice of loving kindness or metta. It says, and to the second, and to the third, and to the fourth, and the same way above, below, basically the 10 directions. So think of it as a circle that expands. The circle envelopes everything around you. That's what the 10 directions is. It's you, and when you spread your thoughts of loving kindness, it's abundant, it's expansive, it's limitless, it's free of enmity and ill will. So they meditate spreading a heart full of compassion. So you do loving kindness, and then you do compassion in the 10 directions, and then you let me see, where's the third, and then equanimity, and finally, wait, there's something missing. So there's loving kindness, compassion, equanimity. There's supposed to be a fourth. Because I thought this was if these are the 4 Brahma Viharas that the Buddha is describing, it's made up of loving kindness, and then compassion, and then equanimity. And there's a 4th one that's called empathetic joy, rejoicing in others' joy. When people are happy, you are happy. So wealth is the 4 Brahma Viharas. Okay, although the Buddha does not include the empathetic joy in this one. Okay, I might have missed it out. I'm not sure. You can check out Chakavati Suta and tell me if I'm right or wrong. Okay. Then now the Buddha talks about power. What is power? It says when a mendicant realizes the undefiled freedom of heart and freedom by wisdom in this very life, you become a sage. And they leave having realized it with their own insight due to the ending of defilements. This is power for a mendicant. That means you have conquered birth and death. It says, mendicants, I do not see a single power so hard to defeat as the power of Mara. It is due to undertaking skillful qualities that this merit grows. What is the power of Mara? It's the influence Mara has over us each time we use our 6 senses, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. This is sometimes referred to as, not sometimes, this is referred to as the 5 skandhas. And Shifu says when we mistake a thief or robber for a son, meaning you hear a sound at night and it's someone coming to rob you, but you think that it's your family member coming home late at night. So this is what regular people do with the 5 skandhas. We think that it represents who we are. We mistake it for who we are. And when that happens, then Mara, they said that Mara has power over us. So when you become a sage, like when you become an arhat, you are free of that. You are no longer confused by your own mind, by your own body, by what you see, what you hear, basically by reality anymore. You are totally clear and lucid in your thoughts. Okay, so Sue has another question. There are 10 Dharma realms. The wheel turning king is in what realm as a name wheel turning? Does it mean the king is expounding Dharma or encouraging people to do good as per her question last week? Oh yes, sorry, your question last week. Okay, so Sue's question is there are 10 Dharma realms, and which Dharma realm does the wheel turning king belong to? The wheel turning king is human. The wheel turning king represents the highest blessings and virtue a human can achieve. So within the 10 Dharma realms, the wheel turning king belongs in the realm of humans, but the wheel turning king can actually go to heaven. Visit heaven. So we are run out of time today, but there's another sutta. Let me show you that I prepared for today. If you look up Jataka 258, it's about Shakyamuni Buddha. In one of his past life, he was a wheel turning king, and he was in this wheel turning king existence. He was known as King Madatu, and he had a very wild existence. He became dissatisfied with life as a human, and he found out that the heaven of the four kings you enjoy has, how you say, the level of life there is a lot better. So he went to the heaven of the four kings, and he was welcomed by the four heavenly kings. And after a while, he got dissatisfied. His desires could not be fulfilled. So he found out that, the heaven of the 33, the Triatrimsha heaven offered more refined pleasures. So he went up there. He was welcomed by Shakya, the lord of the heaven of the 33, and he was made a co-ruler. Shakya actually divided the heaven of 33 into two and gave the king half of the heaven to rule. Like I said, this is a very wild existence for this wheel turning king. So this wheel turning king actually lived in the heaven of the 33 for a very, very long time. He outlived 33 chakras. During his existence there, ruling over half of the heaven of 33, 36 Lord Chakras came, died, got reborn in the human realm, came, died, got reborn in the realm 36 times. 36 different Lord Chakras. And all this time, this king was still there. Yeah. And it was still not enough. Then one day he had a thought. He said, maybe I should kill this Lord Chakra and rule over the entire heaven of the 33. And then when he had this thought, he fell back to earth and his life ended. And he wanted people to know that although he had such a good life, the moral of the story, why the Buddha shared the story, is that desires, if you don't overcome desires can never be fulfilled. Even for a human enjoying heavenly pleasures, it is still not enough. So what we need to do is to, and this pertains to Saha's question as well, is to look at the root of desire, which is ignorance, and to pull that out. That's the only way we can end desire. Because after a while, when we go to heaven, we want more. That's the nature of desire. Yeah. So that's King Madatu. And your question about the wheel turning king expounding the Dharma, the wheel turning king does not expound the Dharma as a Buddha does, because the Buddha's Dharma is all about helping. It's all about making Buddhas. In the Lotus Sutra, the only reason the Buddha comes into this world is to spread the one vehicle, the supreme vehicle, which is the Buddha vehicle. He wants all living beings to become Buddhas. That's the purpose of the Dharma. Whereas the wheel turning king teaches people how to do good, but it's not about ending birth and death. or ending afflictions or desire or ignorance. So the teachings are similar, but the intentions and the goals behind the teachings are very different. I hope that's helpful. Just like Taoism and Buddhism, a lot of the practices are very, very similar. The meditation and all that are similar, but the intention and the goals behind using those practices are very, very different. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in a very wild story, check out Chataka number 258, King Badatu. Yeah. Okay. Let's. Any more questions? Anyone wants to share? And then next week we can finally get on to the heavens. Okay, while waiting to see if anyone has anything, let's. I'm going to share the dedication of merit. Okay, I'm going to invite everyone joining me, putting our palms together. Oh, sorry, this is wrong slide. Okay, right slide. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay, let's do 3 bows to the Buddha and then to Shufu. Okay, 3 bows to the Buddha. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Bowing respect to the Venerable Master. Second bow. Third bow. Half bow. Okay, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Okay, Amitabha.
Amitabha, thank you, Pastor.